I'll be back with the whole fire department.
Get off my plane.
One of the classic wonders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known is this. Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Coming back with a bang. Big fan of bangs. Hey, how are you? Mark here, the Cinemaniac. You, I hope, are a Cinemaniac if you're watching this show, if you dig flicks like I dig flicks. That makes us together the titular Cinemaniacs. That's the title of the show. Used to be two of us here, now it's just me. But I'd like to think I do enough talking for two people. So, it's been a while since I've been around, but while I've been gone, I've been around. And I'm here to get caught up. It's a catch-up show. It's a smattering of what has been in theaters for the last couple of weeks and what I've seen in the last couple of weeks. It's not everything. It's what I wanted to see and maybe was happy and maybe was not happy that I saw. So we're going to hop right into this and hopefully have time to talk about everything and give it more than a sentence or two. We're going to wing on over here. Hey, well done. Hi. We have this is the newest film. This is the new big film. This is actually something very current that's new and is currently in theaters that I just saw yesterday. This is the newest film from the works of Stephen King, based on a book by Stephen King. This is the sequel to The Shining, based on the book. So, you know, hey. We have Ewan McGregor as little Danny Lloyd, all grown up and still hearing voices in his head, still feeling that little tingle, that little shine going on, still fighting against the forces of evil that draw him back to the Overlook Hotel, and this is a flick entitled Dr. Sleep. So from the director who brought us the Netflix Gerald's Game, also a Stephen King adaptation, which I thought was quite good. Bruce Greenwood, who is the co-star of Gerald's Game, also in Dr. Sleep. We have the sequel to The Shining, and okay, I'm kind of cynical about a lot of stuff. I'm kind of cynical about movies in a pretty big way. And when I saw the trailers for this that just played up, you know, recreating and referencing moments in The Shining, I'm like, yeah, that's great. We have The Shining already. And as far as a lot of us are concerned, it's kind of perfect. We don't need to redo any of The Shining. So to me, going into this, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder that this was just going to be a cash grab that's trying to, you know, recreate the greatest hits of The Shining for people who kind of want to see a watered-down version of a movie they've already seen, or trying to go back one more time and all this other kind of stuff. Again, it is based on a book that Stephen King wrote of his own free will and volition, and he is very much in favor of this film adaptation. Everything I had heard about this movie going in from everybody I know was saying how great this movie was, and I didn't like it. I was going in, giving it a fair shot. I had heard so many good things, I thought, this is, wow, maybe I'm more interested than I thought. Ewan McGregor's fine as the grown-up Danny Lloyd. You see many visual references to The Shining, little scenes that were shot with people who kind of sort of look and sound like Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, and a little boy who kind of looks like the boy who played Danny way back when, Danny Lloyd. But it's not those people. And it takes me out of the movie. It sort of fills in some gaps that connects The Shining to this film, but it really is about this little boy who has this gift or curse, as it were, who has grown up severely damaged as a result of the things that happened in the course of the film The Shining, the story of the book, and is trying to just get through life without using these powers. And unfortunately, forces of evil keep reaching out to him. So you keep seeing visual cues from The Shining. You keep seeing traumatic elements from that movie in Dr. Sleep. And this guy basically tries to run away from all that, winds up in New Hampshire, funny enough, made up towns in New Hampshire that aren't real, but it was, you know, it's always amusing to see your home state when it's one that doesn't get featured in films very much as part of a major motion picture. Everybody in the film is fairly good. I just didn't. I thought it was kind of cheesy. You know, Stephen King is. I always say he's eminently readable. When you're reading a Stephen King book, it's just like it's like hot butter, and you just fly through those pages. You totally get the world that he's creating. But there are isms in Stephen King's writing that I find silly or cheesy or annoying, and those kind of pop up here a little bit. Basically, the story again is Danny Lloyd is grown up. He's trying to run away from his problems and the evil and the powers, but there's this group of gypsy soul vampires that are sort of connecting with these people, these kids who have the shining power, and trying to kill them for their soul to stay young forever. And from the first moment they show up in the movie, I just feel it felt cheesy. It felt like a TV movie to me on many levels. I mean, the effects are pretty good. The acting caliber is quite good. It's well made, but I'm having a problem lately, one of many, where I'm in a theater and I'm watching a new mainstream flick and I get to a point where I just stop caring. I'm just like, yeah, I don't care anymore. Just do what you're going to do and let me get out of here. And that happened with Dr. Sleep well before the finale. I really don't want to give any spoilers, but let's just say if you love The Shining, this movie strongly connects to The Shining. But the problem for me is this movie ain't The Shining, and it ain't Stanley Kubrick. And when you're trying to recreate moments from the original films with sort of look-alike actors, it comes off as cheesy to me. And it comes off as distracting because you're looking at this guy who's supposed to be Jack Nicholson, Jack Torrance from the original film, and he's delivering all these lines, and you're like, well, he kind of sounds like Jack Nicholson, he kind of looks like him there, but at that and I'm not paying attention to the movie anymore. I'm comparing this to this other thing. I think it was a no-win situation. In a book, you're imagining the character you always imagined and saw before. It's just words on a page. You're creating the images in your mind. But in a movie, you can't do that. So you either resort to CGI like Rogue One did and recreate Grand Moff Tarkin and Princess Leia, and it don't work, or you cast somebody else who doesn't look like the other people, and you're taken out of the movie and confused because it doesn't look like the people in the other movie, or you cast people who look and sound like them, and 1 out of 30 times it might actually work, and your brain just drifts and it works out okay. So the film is obviously about loss and trauma and how we deal with that and how it shapes us as a human being through the course of the rest of our life. That's what Torrance is dealing with. And also these other people who have this gift and whether they view it as a good thing or a bad thing. But it was just all over the place. I'm sure anybody who's listening to me say this will be yelling at their screen, that's assuming anybody's watching, that the book was so much better. In the book, it sold all this stuff. You have to read the book. And you're right. You probably should have read the book because the movie just seemed disjointed and kind of meandering and very cheesy, and I don't get off on, it's The Shining again. I've got The Shining. The Shining's perfect. I can watch it anytime I want. I don't need a recreation. I don't need a sequel. I don't need a prequel. I don't need a remake. The Shining is The Shining, and it's fine. So, Dr. Sleep, in theaters now. Apparently it's not doing well. So if you want to see this film, I think you probably have 2-3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks before some more big titles ramp up and start pushing underperformers out of the theater, but I would say sooner is better. Always better in a theater. The sound design is really good. There is some actually kind of pretty cool imagery in this movie, so if you want to see it, I would say see it big and see it soon. I saw it yesterday, holiday, Monday, 3 p.m. at a large theater, and there was maybe a dozen people there, maybe. So I think it's not long for this world. And I think like so many latter-day sequels, 30, 40 years after the original, it's probably just going to be forgotten. So speaking of sequels that took a long time to happen, 1984, pretty good year for media. Pretty good year. I argue maybe the greatest year of the 80s as far as media is concerned. TV, movies, music, all that stuff. Olympics, too. We had, in 1984, we had the Terminator. Ooh, Terminator. Not terribly high-tech movie, but a really good idea. Arguably stolen from an Outer Limits episode, Harlan Ellison believed. And good casting, decent effects for the budget, and it blew everybody's minds. A few years later comes Terminator 2. Oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Terminator 2, nobody's ever seen action like this. Nobody has seen a story like this, the concept. It was melting people's minds. Nobody had seen anything like that before. Then they just kept making a bunch of sequels. They kept making sequels and sequels and sequels. They made a TV show that wasn't half bad. They keep trying to keep the Terminator series going. Told you that story to tell you this one. We have a new Terminator movie in theaters. It's been out for a couple weeks. Linda Hamilton is back. Other cast members are back that you really shouldn't know about before you see the movie, but the trailers are going to tell you all about it. This is Terminator Dark Fate. That is brilliant. They had a different character say the line that has been said in every one of these movies. Isn't that amazing? It's like this huge flip when you have somebody... I didn't like this. This was lame. I kind of feared this from the trailers. It's the greatest hits. This is Terminator 2 all over again. We have Terminator 2. I have Terminator 2. You can dial up Terminator 2 on your device and watch it right now. We don't need a watered down, lame redux of Terminator 2. I was thinking about this. All these franchises that keep coming back and everybody gets excited about, and oh, they got so-and-so back, or they're doing it one more time. When you really are honest with everybody and ourselves, it's really like one good movie, maybe two good movies. And then it is repeatedly for years trying to recapture something that you're never going to get again because you're never going to see that for the first time again. Occasionally they go off in the distance and they try to do something different with these and they fail. It's usually just more of the same thing over and over again. As much as the new Star Wars trilogy has been fun, it's really just remakes of the original movies. It's really kind of pointless. So here we have Terminator Dark Fate. The big excitement is that Linda Hamilton is back, and somebody else who I'm not going to say, because if you're watching this on YouTube and I've cut the trailers out, maybe you don't know who the other returning cast member is, which really should be a surprise when it comes in the movie. It should be blowing your mind. You shouldn't be going into this movie knowing this, but it's probably on the posters too. So it's the same story again. Basically, the opening moments of this film, which I will give credit, the opening moments of this film do some, I don't know if you call it age reduction or CGI people or something that takes people from Terminator 2, and it feels like there's another scene they shot back then that we never saw, but it was something that was created recently. Basically, after they'd say, okay, everything after Terminator 2, forget it, which is a strength of this Terminator franchise, is that at any point you can make a sequel and say, well, this is a different timeline. Like they sent a Terminator back to 1941, and this is what the story's about. Or they sent it, 5 minutes after Kyle Reese left the room in the first movie. Here's a new timeline for the Terminator. That's what the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV show did, which is kind of cool. So we're saying, okay, Terminator 2 was the last one that matters, which I agree with. And they do something in the first minute or two of this new movie that's just like, okay, yeah, forget all that. All the things everybody went through in those last two movies, forget all that. Starting over again. And basically we have the exact same thing. There's a Terminator sent back or a cyborg sent back from the future to protect somebody who's the key to the resistance in the future, and another Terminator is sent back that's a bad one, and they fight a lot, and the Terminator that's the bad one is sort of like a really lame version of the Robert Patrick Terminator from the second movie, and it's just like, it's a gigantic who cares. The action is okay. There are moments where it's okay, but none of it is memorable to me. Like, you see T2 and you can remember those set pieces and you can remember those amazing moments. And here, at best, you just get recreations of those moments that aren't as well done. Yeah, great. Linda Hamilton is back and she swears a lot and she's angry. Thrilling. That other character is back and it is made to be kind of goofy and silly. Kind of great, but we did that in T2. The new characters I don't care about. I just don't. It's not who they cast. It's partly the character. Maybe it is partly the actors, but I just didn't care. It really felt like a TV movie. It felt like we're trying to kickstart a Terminator TV show, and we got a couple of the original cast members back to get you excited to watch it, but then we're going to hand it off to these new people that honestly you really kind of don't care about. So I thought this, some people really like this. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm cynical and getting tired of mainstream movies or something, but some people really like this. They're excited to see some of the cast members back again and to get another Terminator movie. But honestly, watch the first two again. Unless a miracle happens, the first two are the only two that matter. I thought the third one was okay. I thought Terminator 3, for a movie that never should have been made, was like a fun action movie, but even that was unnecessary. So keep them sequels coming, folks. I think this is also not doing very well, so maybe audiences are getting tired of the same old crap. Speaking of something that is very much not the same old crap, this one's really odd. This one you might have to hunt a little more to find. Here we have the director of Thor Ragnarok and What We Do in the Shadows, starring as a happy-go-lucky Hitler in a film about a member of the Hitler Youth who finds a young Jewish girl is hiding to survive in his house, and what does he do about it in the wacky comedy Jojo Rabbit. I wasn't quite sure going into this if I would like it or not. I've heard nothing but good things about What We Do in the Shadows, and what I've seen of this director's work I've really liked. And the director, I maybe mentioned, he plays the Hitler character. And it starts out, and it's very wacky. It's very wild. My take on this was, if you took 1975 Mel Brooks and you brought him to the present day and you told him to make a movie about the Hitler Youth, this is what you'd get. It's very Mel Brooks. It's very Pythonic. It is not pro-Nazi. It is very it's anti-fascist, anti-racist, anti-fear of the other. It is poking fun at the Nazis, very much in the way the British have for decades in their media. And it's really well done. It was Fox Searchlight, but obviously it had a lot of money behind it because it looks like, it's not grand large-scale battle sequences. It takes place in the waning days of World War II in Germany, where their armed forces are not doing very well, and it follows this little boy Jojo who wants to be a good Nazi and go into the Hitler Youth and turn in Jews like he's supposed to do, and he is faced with, what do you do when there's one of these people you're supposed to hate living in your house, and you find out, gee, despite what I'm being told, this is actually a human being. And it's tender and it's moving and it says a lot about what's going on in the world today, as any good satire does. But it's also really funny, like really, really funny and ridiculous. You've got some actors you do recognize. Scarlett Johansson's in it. Sam Rockwell is in it. What's her name? Rebel Wilson is in it. All of whom are very funny, and it's just. It does what a good comedy should do, which is it surprises you, it shows you things you've never seen before, and it is pretty outrageous at times. So I saw this actually in the heart of New York City, sold-out show, even though the film has been out for a few weeks. Really good crowd reaction, wider a wider variety of types of people seeing this than you would expect, and everybody seemed to really like it a lot. So I would definitely say search this out. It's probably not going to play everywhere. This is more of an art house movie, but if you have a big, like at AMC where I saw it, or an Alamo Drafthouse, or something that mixes the art house and the mainstream stuff, you may have a shot at this. It's a goodie. It is certainly better than the previous two films I talked about. Speaking of better than the previous two films I talked about, there's another film I've been waiting to see for a long time, and I finally got out to see. This has been sort of a slow rolling out art house release. It is a Korean film from the director of Snowpiercer and Memories of Murder, which is a good crime drama. And it is about this family who lives in poverty, who finds a way to become the staff for a rich couple and their children. One thing leads to another, and stuff goes really wrong and really dark, and it shows you what you may become if you choose to be a parasite. So this is one that I've been waiting to see for a while, waiting to find a time and place where I could see it. This is, again, I'm weekending far away from where I'm doing this show, so I have a lot more film options at my fingertips or my eyeballs. And I finally saw it, and oh dear, this is really good. This is a film that also was packed audience, not the kind of folks, not casting a stirge upon anybody, not the kind of folks that you would think would be going to see a 2-hour Korean, some people have called it a horror comedy, a more drama thriller comedy, light thriller, I don't know. It was really good. Packed audience, tiny theater packed audience. This is really good. This is, as I said, this family lives slightly below ground to sort of signify their station in life, and they get the opportunity, they create the opportunity, they steal the opportunity to work for a rich family so that they can be making some serious money and be living in luxury, at least in their workplace. And they go to extreme measures to secure these jobs and maintain these jobs, and something happens as a result of that, and it leads to this series of events that gets extremely dark and unpleasant. And how do they keep this from ruining this cozy situation that they have created? It is very funny at times. It's very low key. It's very straight-faced funny. There are times where you're sort of recoiling in horror but laughing at the same time, and it's really interesting. It's very much about social strata, social levels. It's about the haves and the have-nots, and it's about how far some people will go to not live underground. I'm not talking about chuds or the mole people, but just get yourself above ground, above water, treading water, what have you. So Bong Joon-ho, thank you. I didn't like Snowpiercer. I thought Snowpiercer was pretty bad, but a lot of people love it. Memories of Murder I thought was really good. And this film I would put far closer to Memories of Murder in terms of being set in reality and just being a really good film. Very well shot. There's some compositions and moments in the film where I thought, wow, this would be just luxurious in 3D, but it wasn't. I would definitely say seek this out. It's subtitled, but there are long stretches of the film that are done without dialogue, and it's not going to kill you to read once in a while. So I really like Parasite a lot. This is another one that I would say is an art house film. This probably will linger for a while. I think this will probably, if you're in the local Keene area, probably will come to the Colonial. If not, again, if you have a nice multiplex with a lot of screens that plays some art house, this is so popular and so well received that you're probably going to get it. I would keep an eye out for it, not to be confused with the 3D horror film from the early 80s. So that's all that I'm going to talk about that I saw in a theater since I last spoke with you. Now we're going to move on to home video. those things you can see on a screen, the size and type of your choice on the streaming service, cable service, download, format, disc, tape, Laserdisc, CED, Blipvert of your choice. We're going to whiffle on over here. And this is the kind of movie I normally would hate. I did not expect to like this movie. Did I like it? I'm not going to give it away. Now you got to watch the clip and I'll tell you. This is the latest in the Fast and Furious saga. This is an offshoot movie, which is kind of interesting. You take two characters that have appeared in the last several Fast and the Furious movies. You give them a little adventure that doesn't have anything to do with those other movies other than they're the same characters, and mayhem ensues in Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. Did not expect to like this. I really don't like the Fast and the Furious movies. I think they're garbage. I think they're overhyped, macho BS with cartoon cars and action you can't visually comprehend. So I went into this one because I had, I don't know, did I pay to see this one? I have Alamo Season Pass, or I have A-List for AMC, so it wasn't kind of out of pocket. And I was just like, okay, here we go again. And not far into the movie, I found myself laughing. And then I found myself enjoying the action sequences because you could actually see what was going on in them. Yes, they're ridiculous, they're cartoony, they're lame, but it felt right in this movie, whereas it didn't in the other ones. The respect I have, if I have any, for the Fast and the Furious movies is that they're not the same thing every time. They've evolved from a street racing drama to damn near science fiction, which is what you have with Hobbs and Shaw. You have Idris Elba is this genetically modified supervillain, super soldier guy who's trying to steal a virus that he's going to unleash around the world. This is like a Bond movie. This is like a superhero movie. This is like a cartoon. And cartoon is probably the best way to describe this. You have these two bald, amped up, jacked up guys who love to sass talk each other and beat each other up and try to act cool even if they're not. And it's really funny. The trash talking in the Fast and the Furious movies I always thought was super forced and never funny. In this, it works. It's yet another mismatched couples buddy cop movie, but it really works here. And as much as I tire of the same genre films that do the same thing again and again and again, once in a while somebody can do it and do it well, and it's just like, okay, yeah, it's another one of these, but it's a fun one. So I really, really had a good time with Hobbs and Shaw. I think if you haven't seen the other movies, it doesn't make any difference because out of the gate, it sets up who these characters are. They don't like each other. One's a cop, the other's a bad guy, and they have to save the world and globetrot a little bit. Also, of a special note is Vanessa Kirby. The whole thing gets in motion because it is the Jason Statham's character's sister, Vanessa Kirby, is involved in this weird virus-stealing plot. She's great. Like, she could have her own movie, too, and I'd be okay with that. Dude, female-led action movie, please. We need more of those that are good, that you can see what's going on. So anyway, Hobbs and Shaw, a hell of a lot of fun. I really liked it. A good, pizza and orange soda movie. I would say rent that because it's a fun time. Speaking of fun times, okay, this is a little different. I don't usually talk about TV on this show. I don't have time to watch much TV because I'm doing this show. But if you like movies, if you saw and like and remember The Karate Kid, this is essential TV. This is, we're going to play the preview. I think this is a preview for the first season. Out on video is the sequel TV series made for YouTube to The Karate Kid. The Karate Kid 2, The Karate Kid 3, picks up 30-something years later with the same characters. Where are they now? This is Cobra Kai Seasons 1 and 2 out now on Blu-ray. So when I heard this was happening a couple of years ago when this was announced, I thought, oh, this is just going to be lame and it's just going to make fun of the characters and it's going to be some half-assed, Funny or Die kind of thing. And they streamed the first episode for free and I gave it a shot and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is good. This is really good. I thought, if you're going to do something like this, if you're going to try to, resuscitate a franchise that's decades old, which we keep seeing every week now and never really works, what I would like to see is something that kind of happens in the second Creed film, or as I like to call it, Rocky IV Part 2. You see Rocky and Ivan Drago just sit down and talk. And the idea is people with all this bad blood in history who haven't seen each other for decades get thrown together again. What happens? So for the Karate Kid, my thought is, so if you had to throw together a bully and the victim many decades later after their lives have taken them whenever they've taken them and they meet each other again, what kind of conversation do they have and what happens? That's sort of what this is about. This really centers more on the William Zabka character, the bad guy from the original Karate Kid, and where his life has led him. And he's hilarious. But the thing is, this is really, really funny, but the drama really works. And the dynamics really, really work. You have Zabka as an adult with a kid who's sort of estranged from him. You have Machio as an adult with a kid, and their children intertwine, and all of their worlds keep intersecting in a way that you see is going to lead up to something big and potentially very unpleasant. There are action sequences. There is karate in this Karate Kid series, and it's really well done. Again, how is TV besting films that cost 10 times more to make, or 100 times more to make? I don't understand it. But the drama is really good. The scripting is really good. It's extremely laugh out loud funny. Zabka's amazing. It's just like, where has this guy been since the Karate Kid? Has he been acting? Because he's really, really good in this. It doesn't skip on the Machio either. Machio is not just a cameo. He is in this a lot. And as the series continues, there was a season 1 and 2, which is what we're talking about now, that you can get. I want to say I thought it was September, but that's passed. I think within the next 6 months, we're going to see the 3rd season show up on YouTube Premium that you can pay. It's like $10 and you can watch them all, which I did and I thought was worth it. And it's certainly worth buying these if you're into the Karate Kid. And the thing is, I was never a big Karate Kid fan. I saw the movie when it was on HBO once, a few times, twice, 3 times. I saw the second one, didn't think it was that great, and never bothered after that. So it isn't iconic in my life, and it's nothing I hold dear, but this is so well done. This is how you do a sequel 30 years later. This is how you bring actors and characters back. In broad strokes, it's rehashing things that happened in the original movie, but it's a hell of a lot more than that. I was never bored by it. It's very efficient storytelling, and again, when the action scenes bust out, they're really, really well done. And as you get into the 2nd season, some more characters come in who are extremely interesting and really, really good. This is like some of the best TV I've seen in a long time, and it was done for YouTube. It's not even TV, although what is TV anymore? It's just wherever you get your long-form storytelling. Anyway, Cobra Kai season 1 and 2 out today, actually, as I tape this, taping on a Tuesday instead of Monday, and I would really, really highly recommend it. So now we're going to move into the Arrow video corner, which we don't have a graphic for anymore. Because I've been away for a while, I'm behind in my Arrow reviews, so we're going to take a stab at 3 of them here, and then there'll be more next week, and more next week, and more next week, because they just keep releasing things. Arrow, as you may know, British-based company who releases predominantly older films, predominantly horror, cult, edgy, oddball movies in like the best versions you've ever seen. The great transfers, great extras, new extras, just amazing stuff. And it's a mix of movies that maybe you've never heard of, maybe I've never heard of, and then movies that everybody's heard of. So first up, I have to keep looking, is a movie that kind of everybody's heard of. And when I saw Arrow doing it, I was like, oh great, the Arrow treatment. But at the same time, I thought, I already have this, and this is like the 5th time this has come out. So do I need to buy it again? Watch the trailer for this film that you may have heard of, and I'll tell you whether you need to buy it again. This is a little ditty from John Landis from 1981 called An American Werewolf in London. Then now you know how it ends. American Werewolf in London, this is a great movie. You talk about a horror comedy, and a lot of horror comedies are funny movies that have horror elements. It's rare that you can get a movie that's legitimately creepy and scary and legitimately funny at the same time, and Landis managed that with this film. So you have David Naughton and Griffin Dunne. They're these 2 American guys backpacking across the moors in Europe, and they get attacked by a wolf man, and Griffin Dunne is killed, not to give anything away, and David Naughton is not, and then a lot of the film is basically him dealing with what happened and trying to make sense of it, and then slowly the full moon blooms, the wolf's bane blooms and the full moon comes out and nature takes its course. It's really well made. Like if you think about the guy who made movies like Schlock and Animal House, making a movie that is as good as this and not, it's silly at times, but it's not like Animal House raucous. It's so well done. It's a horror classic, and sometimes you forget that it's even a comedy when you think back on it because the horror elements are so good. And you have the werewolf transformation sequences that are so impressive. So this is an Arrow edition, and the treatment is amazing. This ports over, to my knowledge, pretty much everything that was on the previous Universal edition of this film, and then a ton of new stuff. It's got 2 or 3 commentaries. This movie looks perfect. The extras are interesting. A feature-length documentary that I watched about just Universal werewolf movies that was really interesting. And a lot of times you get something like that on one of these video releases, and they kind of breeze through the history portion to just focus on the movie you bought. This doesn't do that. This spends a lot of time on Werewolf of London and the Wolfman and all these other films from the 30s up to the movie that we're talking about in '81. You get new featurettes with Landis. You get old featurettes with Landis. You get vintage featurettes and behind the scenes about the special effects and the cast. It's and then raw footage of molds being made of cast members. It's just fascinating. Even without the extras, the movie is great. It's legitimately funny. It's legitimately creepy. It has very iconic moments. Some of the when the man's being stalked in the subway, it's just amazing, and the transformation scene's amazing. And it's just, how much do you have to say about American Werewolf in London? If you're a horror fan, you probably already own this. The question always hangs when Arrow puts out an edition is, well, I mean, if Arrow puts out an edition, there's no question. You want to buy this and get rid of your old one. But when a new edition comes out of something old, it's like, well, does it really look that much better? Are the extras enough to make me want to buy it again? Because it's really just the movie I'm going to watch again and again. But again, I got it for free, so of course I've upgraded and thrown my old one out. But I think this version is absolutely worth it. It's a great movie. It's one of the great horror movies, certainly of the 80s, if not all time. And Arrow's edition, it just makes all the others obsolete, like it often does. Up next, speaking of horror, we move on to another Arrow film. I'm not sure if this was Arrow Academy or if this is just straight Arrow Video. Once in a while, Arrow will put out a new film, new to video. Its video debut will be on Arrow. Something that's usually independent, lower budget, lesser known, that they feel like is important and should be part of their collection, much like Criterion does. And this is a film set in a mental hospital where recently deceased patients are sort of just waking up again and getting better from being dead, but they're not quite right. This is what happens when you find yourself in the dead center. So this is interesting. This was one that I do recall playing theatrically in New York not that long ago. I think October is what it said there. Brief run before video. It's interesting. This again is it's low budget, but it looks good. Low budget doesn't have to mean it's garbage. You know, it just means that it's not, you know, big names and big action and big CGI, which to me is none of those are required to have a good movie. Set in a psychiatric ward, mental hospital, and it's this weird thing where these people who are in the morgue on the slab just kind of wake up, and they're sort of okay, but not quite. And they kind of swing back and forth between sort of being like zombies and then just being normal and talking normal and sort of like, hey, I'm okay, I can go home, and then things aren't quite right. It's very quiet. It's very dreamlike. There are long periods of no dialogue, very quiet periods. It almost felt like, because I think I was watching a set that I shouldn't be talking about today, but will next week, it feels a lot like Japanese horror in a way. Very, very thoughtful, very methodical. There are bursts of like fast, frenetic editing and noise and things like that, which I'm not a fan of, but it's not a boring movie by any stretch. It's not fast-paced like a lot of you know, mainstream horror tends to be sometimes. No names you would recognize in the film, and the people behind the scenes I don't think have made anything you would have heard of, but it's interesting. It's very much an art house horror thriller, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to hardcore horror fans, but if you're interested in something a little more thoughtful and a little more contemplative or intelligent, I would suggest this. Transfer looks great. It's Arrow, of course it does, and it's loaded with extras. I mean, short films and radio plays and interviews and commentaries and everything you'd want to know and more about the movie and the people who made it is the dead center. So we have one more left that I will jump right into. This is an older title. This is what Arrow's doing too, which makes me happy, is they're delving deeper into the archives of studios like Universal, and they pull out this. This is the biopic starring James Cagney of Lon Chaney, the man, I won't say it, Lon Chaney, the man who was known for such characters as the original Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Phantom of the Opera, the Immoral Three, on and on and on. He was in a million films in the silent era, not too many in the sound era, and his namesake became the Wolfman. This is the story of The Man with 1,000 Faces. So nice to see Arrow tackling a classic. And what's funny, the movie is a classic, and it is an older studio film, but it's also, and it's a biopic, but it's also a genre film because it's about horror movies. And you see, well, not entirely. I mean, Chaney didn't just work in horror movies. I think his most his most finely remembered roles that culture still knows are the iconic horror characters that he played. London After Midnight being another one that sadly nobody can watch. So you have Cagney as Chaney. Doesn't really look like Chaney. But that's okay, that's been done before. And it's a pretty melodramatic biopic. There's a lot of, there's a decent-sized little visual essay documentary on this disc, and then there is an audio commentary with Tim Lucas, formerly a Video Watchdog, Mario Bava's biographer. If you see something that's going to have a Tim Lucas commentary, listen to it. He's good. He's really good. And this basically, Tim Lucas tells you the history of this movie, the history of everybody in this movie, but then also the reality of what you're seeing on screen versus, how events are depicted versus reality, timelines, the story of the actual people being depicted on screen, and more about the life of Lon Chaney himself. So this is a very educational package here. The film itself, it's fairly accurate. It's kind of accurate. It's sort of in the realm of what happened, as most biopics tend to take artistic license for dramatic reasons. But it's good. It's very respectful. It's very sad. This movie's kind of a downer for the most part. And it also focuses more on the personal life of Chaney than it does the film life of Chaney. So you see recreations of his famous film roles and stuff with him on the set and him sort of developing makeup and all that. But it's really more about his relationship with his deaf parents and his wife and his next wife and his son, who would go on to become Lon Chaney Jr. and all this other stuff. So if you're a fan of classic horror, it's definitely worth seeing. If you're a fan of old Hollywood, it's definitely worth seeing. It looks gorgeous. I mean, obviously, what am I saying? It's Arrow, so a crisp black and white transfer. Not loaded with extras, but that's okay because the movie's good. And that is The Man of a Thousand Faces, and that is pretty much all I have time to talk about this week. I will be seeing The Irishman, I've been told, this weekend. The new Martin Scorsese film produced by Netflix, which is being put into very, very few theaters in the country. I got a ticket. So next Friday, I'll be seeing The Irishman, so we'll be talking about that. Charlie's Angels, the latest incarnation of Charlie's Angels, is coming out. Ford versus Ferrari, which looks pretty good. I'm not a car guy, but I'm a car movie guy, and this movie looks like it's a good car movie, so I'm into that. The Good Liar, which is a cool-looking movie with Helen Mirren and Ian McKellen, amongst others. Video, we have Blinded by the Light, a couple Arrow titles, Apprentice to Murder, the Ring trilogy, the Ringu trilogy, the Japanese horror films that started a sea of imitators that have yet to dissipate, and more. I will be back with all of that and rambling and probably more of this bushy stuff on my face. Until then, I am Mark, I am the Cinemaniac, and I will see you at the movies. Bye.